So now we're going to talk about how we can address barriers to housing. And this is looking at two topic areas that came up as a result of the engagement that we've done so far. Those two topics are around the financial impacts of housing on municipalities, and also strategies for effective outreach and engagement. Whitney, Demetrius, and Sade, Ratliff from CHAPA, as I mentioned earlier, they will focus on how to engage and build trust with our communities around these important issues to ensure that residents feel heard and involved. I love the wedding style walker. Do you guys mind if I take the microphone?
How? Thank you.
Hello, everyone. As Doug sort of prefaced already, we do have an abbreviated time, but it's because we wanted to give you guys an opportunity to ask more questions and engage in the Q&A. So I will give you the meat of everything. What you see up there is not necessarily what I will say, but you will be getting all of the information nonetheless. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the speakers that went prior. My name is Sade Ratliff. I am the Municipal Engagement and Fair Housing Associate at CHAPA, and I'm going to be walking you today through how you create a collective story and then how you leverage that story to increase your community engagement when you are building coalitions around this housing cause. Am I advancing?
What do you got? Yeah.
All right, so to tell you a little bit about CHAPA and what we do, we'll run through it really quickly, but our mission here at CHAPA is to encourage the production and preservation of housing that is affordable to low and moderate income families. So doing a lot similar work to what you guys are doing, but we split it into 3 buckets. The first bucket that we split our work into is our Municipal Engagement Initiative, which Whitney and I work closely on, which builds grassroots coalitions. We also have our home ownership team, which works to produce home ownership opportunities for low income and marginalized communities through a bunch of different programs. And then we also have our policy team, which informs the work that we sort of collect on the ground, right, and the problems that we're getting from our municipal engagement and home ownership opportunities, and then using that to create policy on the state level. So as you all know, and as Secretary Augustus prefaced for us, local support is critical to building the housing coalitions on the ground. If you don't have the local support, or people don't feel like they have a stake in advancing this housing agenda, they don't care. And I guess prior to sort of this housing boom and the interest that we see in housing now in our economy, it was really hard to get that local support. So in 2018, CHAPA established what we call the Municipal Engagement Initiative to build these grassroots coalitions and really advance a pro-housing mission on the ground. And so the way that we do that, which Whitney will tell us a little bit about, is by building a big tent coalition. Do you want to tell the folks what a big tent coalition is?
There's a big tent camera, get line here. Thanks, Sade. Again, I'm Whitney Demetrius. I'm the Director of Fair Housing and the Municipal Engagement Initiative program here. And so much about what fair housing means. It means access to information and to public process. And so in our big tent coalition model, what we frame this around is making sure that everyone is in the room, right? Not just typical folks, not being sort of expanding outside of that in terms of not your usual suspects. So bringing folks in around the housing discussion that have expertise in civic groups, social services, housing authorities, religious leaders, councils on aging, all these various groups that you'll see here listed, and bringing them together where housing overlaps with all of these issues. So we're working on not only getting younger people and more diverse voices at the table and seeing that as important. So everyone has their different roles, right? We often ask the question of, what is the role of the housing advocate? What is the role of the resident and local staff and elected officials and legislators? And so the idea is that they all work together. Part of the reason why we didn't call our program the Community Engagement Initiative is because we understand that in order for work to happen, really has to happen in many ways, and to get outside of the silos of the work that we do and working together interchangeably. So the housing advocate will educate residents and communicate the community's needs and work to do that effectively, where the residents who sort of uplift their lived expertise as expertise, right? Their lived experience, and bringing those things to the table, showing how those programs and those fundings actually work on the ground is important for all of these various pieces to work together to affect change, right? And so the local staff and elected officials like to create policies and funding and maintain the existing structures and work with the state in terms of local considerations. And the legislators work on enforcement agency and funding and creating and amending policy. So everyone has their own role, and oftentimes we're thinking about how do we actually build public will to kind of get things done, right? How do we move from ideas to actual action, right? So Educating is an important piece of doing that. Listening, actively listening is certainly important. And how do we empower people and build trust at the same time, right? Part of how we do that is to value each person's voice, each person's expertise, and what they bring to the table. And really centering that in a shared sense of collective responsibility. How many of us have ever heard of or at least read this book? Okay, many of us, at least half of the room. This book, The Color of Law, written by Richard Rothstein, A Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America, we utilized back in 2021, February 2021, we worked with the Black and Latino Caucus to come together to educate legislators and give each legislator this book, right? We delivered a book. We worked in coalition with some of our partners to this idea that how do we get people across the board with us? How do we bring them along our rainbow path, right? We have to kind of start at the same space. And so leaning on our trusted partners in the legislature through that caucus and educating them so that when we came to them and made the case around the issues, the policies we were trying to move forward, we were on the same page in terms of what we were talking about to remedy and to redress. So examples like that are indicators of doing this well. There's a recent report book by Catherine Einstein, David Click, and Maxwell Palmer, who observed numbers of public meetings. Many of us in this room, right, have participated in public meetings and talked about who actually shows up. And in those, looking at thousands of meeting minutes, they found that older white males are predominantly showing up to those meetings, right? And predominantly in opposition to new projects. And so because of that, we understand that we have to be asking ourselves who is missing from the table. And in order to do this well, it means putting resources, it means putting time and intention around doing just that, right? It means making sure you have translation and food and timing and understanding the implications of having hybrid meetings and these sorts of things. So now I'll turn it back over to Sade quickly to talk a little bit about making the case.
Yes, thank you guys for bearing with us. As we said, it's condensed, it's tight, but it's so that you guys can ask a lot of questions at the end. So to transition us from understanding why we're building those stories, what those stories are, and how we're building a coalition, into some framework for how you build those stories, right? Everyone in this room has a different story. You all started from a different place. All the people that you serve also have different stories and come from different places. And here at CHAPA, we like to rely on a framework built by Dr. Tiffany Manuel called case making. And case making in a strategic sense, in short, I know you guys are literate, but I'm gonna read it to you anyways. Strategic case making is not about preaching to the converted. It is about aligning and mobilizing diverse groups of institutions, residents, agencies towards better outcomes for all of us. So building that big tank coalition doesn't just mean that I take Jimmy's interests and I take Bob's interests and they follow in their own line. We're looking to sort of bring those two things together. And so a way that you do that, as my colleague Lily likes to highlight, is through building your goals and understanding your goals and telling these stories. Same as when you're building a business, if you don't have a strategic plan, a strategic framework, your story is going to fall flat when you try to deliver it. So understanding locally what your interest is and what your goals are when you're communicating that story. Understanding how you're supporting the efforts of your community, how you're building a culture that is welcoming, understanding how you're bolstering the efforts that already exist in your community. Sometimes you don't have to rebuild the wheel, you just have to push down the line. And then also using these other tools that you have to build that local strategy. And so I want to talk a little bit about how you use these stories in the community engagement process. A way that you can do that is by building a strong lead, using case-making principle number 1. Again, taking Billy and Jen and making them understand that they are both people from Lowell, they are both people from Drake, and then working together to build more alignment towards housing advancement is going to make their lives better. Same as Doug told us. As long as we're all on the same page and we're working towards the same cause, no one is losing anything at the end of this battle. And then I did want to give you guys a framework for how to utilize data. There are 4 slides that communicate this. I'm going to give it to you in one sentence and we'll skip to the end. But you don't want to just communicate data. You want to do what Doug did in the last presentation. You want to turn the numbers into stories, right? You want to tell people how it's not just about the fact that I work in this one community and I make $45,000 a year and I can't afford a home, right? You don't want to just say 30,000 people in Lowell work in the public sector and 30,000 people are home burdened. You want to tell them that Jill's been living in this community since she was 10 years old. She loves this community. She values the people in it. She is a regular at the grocery store, and Jill is not a person that can afford to stay in this community. You want to do what Doug did. You want to do what Secretary Ed Augustus did in order to galvanize people and put faces to the numbers that you're seeing. I have 0 minutes left, but we're going to get to the end. And I think that a way that you can leverage that data is just to combat some of these housing misconceptions, right? So when people say, I don't want the character of my town to change, tell them how Lowell has a diverse range of people in it. And you can feel free to ask us more specific questions. Whitney's gonna skip us to the end. But feel free to ask us more specific questions. I want you all to understand that the central message of this presentation is that you want to leverage your stories in a way that galvanizes people. You want to build a collective sense of we and not just a sense of I, so that you as a coalition and as a community can work together to advance the mission of fair housing. We do have one more thing. They can't boo me on the stage because I'm already here, but we did want to give space for Lily Link to tell you a little bit about our MBTA Communities program and how you might be able to leverage these stories in your coalition building with the work that she's already actually doing on the ground around you guys.
Thank you. I'll be very quick. My name is Lily Link. I'm the MBTA Communities Engagement Senior Manager at CHAPA, joined by my colleague Will, who is the MBTA Communities Engagement Manager, working alongside me. And we wanted to come here today because there are a lot of votes coming up. For anyone who is not familiar with the MBTA Communities Law, in brief, it was a law passed by the state legislature in 2020 that requires 177 communities to create a district in town that allows for multifamily housing by right. I could go on and on about why I think this is important, but I'll save those for another time. But tonight we are actively seeking out folks in Dracut, Tewksbury, and Billerica who are interested in getting this law passed in your community. The deadline is approaching at the end of this year. It's going to be a town meeting in Dracut on Monday the 18th. Tewksbury has voted down the law and does not currently plan to bring it back, so we would love to see things turn around there. And in Billerica, there is a potential open town meeting on December 12th. They have actually not decided whether or not they're going to move forward with that. So we would love to see them do that. So please come visit us in the back. We have some materials to share. We can give you our contact information, get your contact information, and hopefully get the MBTA Communities Law passed all across Northern Middlesex. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this presentation.